Let's do it. Let's go out to Colorado. Evan, he, him has some thoughts maybe on some historical figures and Jesus. And what you got for us today, Evan?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So I wanted to ask about the historical relevance for like finding a figure to match up the Christ figure, the Yeshua figure to.
Hmm.
I started thinking about like King Arthur, some other people that might be sort of legendary, and like there could be some kings or some pseudo, like mythological people that we're basing that off of. And I'm like, what's going on for Jesus? Because I can't like pick a person and say, oh, that's
Yeah.
probably Jesus.
Yeah, and this is definitely the historicity and whole mythicist debate around the figure of Jesus is a very interesting one, I think, in an academic sense. For me personally, it's not something that really keeps me up at night, and I often don't find using it when discussing with believers, super worthwhile. But that being said, in the purely academic sense of just trying to trace this narrative as far back as we can go in history, well, for a lot of us, especially in the more Christian themed or kind of Christian dominant countries, we've heard a lot of stories before about how like solid all of this evidence is. But when you do actually go back through it, I find a lot of people kind of end up where you're at, Evan, where it's like, well, we don't really seem to have good stuff for this person, like we do with a lot of other things. George Washington, for instance, there's a lot of really, really good historical evidence. When we go back that far in history, it gets harder and harder to nail it down. All of that being said, Evan, I'm definitely no historian. I'm definitely no expert on this. And there are a bunch of people that have, really, really great scholarship on this from a lot of different perspectives, both, believers, non believers, all different stripes. Um, Oftentimes, when we go that far back in history, it is just kind of the base assumption, like if people are writing about a person, we tend to just go like, yeah, probably some dude exists, right? Because we know people have existed and we know like people existed way back when in that area. And there was probably some guy walking around being like, let me tell you about God. Which, okay, that's probably the best, I think, when I look at stuff. But again, for me, this isn't something that keeps me up super much at night. But Richard, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever
I'm,
delved
I'm
into the historicity of Jesus?
I have a little bit. I'm actually
Yeah.
interested in Evan's opinion on this. Is there anyone you've kind of come across in that respect, Evan, that you think might be kind of Jesus adjacent, shall we say?
That is a great question. I have not. I could only say like what secular rarity said. Like, if we're gonna put based on a true story in front of this, it's gonna be so vague that like there might have been an apocalyptic, traveling rabbi, but that's I
Well,
haven't
I mean, we do
seen it.
that now
I did.
in movies. We put based on true stories in movies now, and some of them are very very loose
Mhm.
regarding the actual
Right.
history from, and this can be from like 20 or 30 years previously. I think the thing with the Jesus account is, and SR touched on it with a little bit with the George Washington thing. We do actually have very very good evidence of historical figures from that period. I mean, my kind of go-to on this is Cleopatra, because she was kind of around the same time, only 20, 30 years previous to the time of Jesus, alleged time of Jesus. Uh, we have busts of her. We know a family line. We've got coins. We've got different busts in different styles. We've got carvings that she made in Egypt of herself, which is stylized again. We've got all this different information. We've got later historical writings, both for and against her. So we've got like this massive, massive pool of evidence for her. And it seems to me that if the Jesus story is correct as put forward by the Christians, Jesus was an infinitely more important character in history than Cleopatra was, and yet we have, to my mind, I think the best evidence we probably have is the closeness of Paul's letters or Paul's writings to regarding Jesus as a historical character. And I think, for me, that's compelling that there was somebody around at that time, because the earliest of Paul's writings were only literally a few years after Jesus' death. And I think it's unlikely that was just completely fabricated. That there were so many people who believed in this guy at this time, and of course, from the same time, we have lots of early Christian sects as well. For me, there was somebody there. There was somebody there who fit this bill and who fit this character. Now, the narrative around this character differed in these different things, and people believed different things about him, and the kind of mythos that grew up about him took a lot longer to kind of become a coherent story. But for me, I don't think there's. I'd be very, very surprised if there wasn't a historical person, or at least historical people from a movement who were kind of talking about the stuff that is reported that Jesus was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely, in part for me, I feel like us granting or just accepting that there probably was somebody, or again, a handful of people all kind of in the same area. Maybe they had the same name. It was a pretty common name, you know. But yeah, accepting that, granting that in a discussion for me doesn't really feel like much, right? Because it's like that moment when we're granting to somebody. It's like, well, yeah, we absolutely accept that you had an experience. We're not saying you're just flat out lying to us. We think you had that experience where you walked down your hallway and then there was this thing there. You are attributing it to a ghost. And I'm just saying, I don't think it was a ghost. I think there's probably something else going on. But we both agree that that experience happened. That doesn't change anything about, what the attribution of it or the supernatural nature of it. But also, I will say that I think it's worthwhile. Again, if this is something that interests you, go look up what the historical Jesus scholars say. Go look up what the mythicist Jesus scholars say. And shake it out on your own terms, I think, because there is a lot of really, really good information out there. And you don't have to do it so that you can, push some narrative or win a point in an argument or something. You can just do it for the sake of learning stuff, man. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being like, hey, this is a topic that interests me, and I'm just going to look further into it. I know there's a handful of great scholarship. I know Richard Carrier is one of the biggest people on the mythicist side. There's a whole bunch of people on the historical side. John Dominic Crossan, I think. Dale C. Allison. There's a bunch of them, man. So definitely. But yeah, give us some of your thoughts on this, Evan.
Well, I wanted to ask about that specifically. That's kind of where I see some like drama brewing. Is like there's like almost this tendency to call mythicists conspiracy theorists, and I've been seeing in comment sections, which take it with a grain of salt, is like, you're you're almost as bad as a climate denialist, and I'm like, whoa, I don't know about all that, but
yeah, I can definitely say, Evan, I'm a fan of us not attributing bad motives to each other, right? Like I agree with you that that's definitely not, and I don't think that's what we have to do, right? Like, I have friends that are mythicists. I have friends that take a historical side, and honestly, at the end of the day, I just don't really know because I've never looked into it super hard. And if the consensus of scholarship is going to say, yeah, it probably was a guy, I'll take that. If somebody says, well, that's a lazy position, SR, yeah, kind of it is. Yeah, kind of it is. I accept that. I'm not,
I've got a question for you, Evan, if you don't mind. If we somehow, if something turned up, if we found some kind of compelling evidence tomorrow that said that there was definitely a man called Jesus
Mhm.
who preached these things. Would that kind of affect your opinion on the whole God question, or whether Jesus was God, or the standard Christian ideas around Jesus? Or would you just look at it as an interesting historical fact that has come to light?
It's a great question.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Yeah. I think I don't think I would be personally moved towards it, because I do like
Mhm.
the historicist like perspective, where they say sort of like maybe draw a line at like the resurrection and like certain miracles like walking on water. Even if I were to grant, like for the sake of conversation, that there was a historical Jesus, just go ahead and but that doesn't get us any closer to the miracles or the the
Mhm.
supernatural claims. So
Right. And it doesn't, and I think also, in addition to that, it doesn't lessen the terrible, harmful part of the message either, right? Like, there's this old, ancient Greek philosopher, Hypatia of Alexandria. Don't know if you ever heard of her or not. It doesn't matter, honestly. It's just that there's a lot of things that are attributed to this person that are like really, really cool. Like it's some really good stuff. But when we go look through the historical evidence, there may not actually have been this singular person that we're attributing it all to, but who cares?
right.
Because it doesn't change the, lack of harm or overall positive benefit of the message. Exactly like you and Richard were just saying, like if we found something tomorrow that said there definitely was this guy named Jesus, he definitely had a mother named Mary and a father named Joseph, and there was like questions about his birth, like great, that doesn't change the fact that Jesus at some point was like, "Hey slaves, obey your masters." Like that doesn't make any of that less harmful. And on the flip side, if we just absolutely found out tomorrow, like no Jesus whatsoever, totally freaking made up from the beginning, well, that doesn't make any of the positive things any less, right? The whole, hey, be nice to people. Yeah, that doesn't change. I mean, that wasn't unique or special to Christianity or anything Jesus said. But at the same time, is it there? Yeah, technically. Okay. Whether he's real or not, oh, slaves shouldn't obey their masters, and
Sure.
we still should be nice to people. Like,
Good point.
well, any other thoughts for us,
Okay.
Evan?
Well, that was about it. It was the drama, and then like
Yeah,
but that's kind of niche. That's very niche. And then
for sure.
you're right. It doesn't really change too much, and we can just keep on debating. So thank you both for
Yeah.
your time.